everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to take a trip up north to the greater Chicago area. Now we wouldn't have a car, so we wouldn't be able to hit up too many different locations, but we'd still get a good amount of action. So let's see what we got. First catches would actually come a good 100 miles north of downtown Chicago in Wisconsin, along the Canadian Pacific's X-Soo Line main line into Milwaukee. This is Duplainville, where the east-west double track of the CP crosses the Canadian National's north-south line into Chicago from Green Bay. This was a must-see spot for me this cloudy morning because of the action here and the old searchlight signals that still guard the interlocking on the CP. Driving around, we'd meet a fellow rail fan who was able to help us with some locations on trains, as since I was with my whole family this day, we wouldn't have much time to spend here. In about 15 minutes, however, we'd set up for a northbound CN manifest led by two GE wide cabs, both 4,400 horsepower variants. According to the locals, this is what a normal freight train looks like up here. A little bit of everything, but always extremely long and always led by 2 to 3 motors all up front. DPUs are apparently pretty rare and uncommon along this portion of the CN. This morning's northbound out of Chicago would be a monster, hitting the defect detector just north of town at 11,000 feet long, with mostly empty traffic out of the Windy City. CN runs 3 pairs of manifest trains in and out of Chicago daily, with a 4th implemented during peak season. CN's clearance of the double diamond would soon light up the Canadian Pacific side, so we'd move over to the west side of the interlocking for the catch. A green signal would be lit as an eastbound CP train bound for Milwaukee approached. With the CP ES44AC leading the charge today, this mixed freight would look similar to that off the CN, except this one would have a DPU, which is the norm for CP. A straight-ahead railroad, some call it, with always one on the head and one in the middle or on the end. Today's train would have an end-train DPU, fittingly a KCS motor, CP's newest and largest acquisition. Three days later, we'd be in Chicago, this morning along the BNSF westbound main out of the city, nicknamed the Racetrack. Running westbound out of Chicago to Aurora, the 42-mile, 3-track main line is not only Metra's busiest route, but also BNSF's main freight route in and out of town. First train of the morning would be westbound Metra 1215, an express train obvious by their speed and strict schedule to keep, transporting employees from the suburbs into town. On BNSF, a high yellow or approach aspect is the default. So if a signal is green or red, that means the train is lined through, although things can get a little confusing when an approach aspect is lined for a train. In our case now, the 2 westbound reds and eastbound greens told me that 2 more trains were lined, starting off with an eastbound 1242, stopping for their station halt at Riverside.
242 to Chicago Union Station is now arriving. Please step behind the yellow line.
set up in the beautiful little town of Riverside this morning, built on the banks of the Des Plaines River, hence the name. It's a favorite spot for many along the racetrack, and this Monday morning it'd be pretty busy while we'd be out. The morning rush here would be far from over by the time Metro Train 1236 would arrive, another booking express train destined for the OTC Transportation Center in downtown. Right on his heels would be train 1244, following the same route with another packed train. Meeting these two on the main line out there would be westbound 1221, led by one of many F40 PHs still painted in Metro's original blue paint scheme from the 90s. Twelve 46 would be next, just 7 minutes later, yet another express train doing track speed.
The next inbound train approaching your station will not stop.
We'd hear of an approaching freight train just a few signal blocks away, but one last Metro would have to clear prior to their arrival. Train 1304 would be at the station just 45 seconds before taking off, as just 4 minutes behind him would be an eastbound BNSF freight led by 3 GE 6-axles, the trailing two being in the railroad's H2 paint scheme variant. BNSF would not disappoint with this one, another beast for their Cicero yard made up of hoppers, tanks, and lots of grain. Coming into the station from the east now would be Metro 1223, set to meet Amtrak 380, an Illinois service train, in just a few minutes. Good morning, everybody. We are just outside of Chicago at Riverside. Beautiful little downtown, quaint little station. Reminds me of this place called Menlo Park, just south of San Francisco along Caltrain's line. But obviously, we've seen a good amount of Metros already. We got another one coming in just a couple minutes. Already seen the BNSF train too. It's just after 10 a.m. So we're waiting on the rush hour for Metro to wrap up here. And then BNSF should let a few trains loose. But still got a few hours out here, so I guess we'll see what we find. Between Naperville and Chicago, there's no stops for Amtrak, so when he'd get to us, he'd be flying. I barely got my camera in focus by the time he showed up. Now at the top of the hour, two more Metros would pull up. One westbound train 1225 and an eastbound train 1254. BNSF would also be following this eastbound in the form of an eastbound intermodal. Like Tampa, Chicago is a port city. However, there's no container traffic off of ships like the ports in Jacksonville or Savannah. I do believe Chicago does get occasional container traffic via Lake Michigan, but there's no railside access. If anything, it's trucked around the city to a facility like Cicero, BNSF's large yard just west of downtown, where phosphates off the CSX terminate, as well as this intermodal train. Two more metros would be soon after, another west and eastbound pair, the westbound 1227 followed by another BNSF intermodal, this one coming out of Cicero bound for points west. Since the train would be departing just a few miles away, I knew they'd be kicking it by the time they'd get to us. However, as soon as the tail end of the train was out of the yard limits, they'd crank their 3 GEs, rolling by at track speed by the time they hit Riverside. Made up of mostly JB Hunt, Amazon, and especially UPS containers and trailers, this would be a high priority train this morning, holding a few metros up the line and forcing a Herzog rail train to wait to depart until they were clear. So in just a few short minutes, here they come, led by a high rail who is inspecting the center main or track 2. The peculiar yellow engine following would be one of Herzog's MPMs, short for multi-purpose machine. In this case, a self-propelled diesel locomotive equipped with PTC, used for anything from the pickup and distribution of ties, rails, and aggregate to even ditching, grading, and vegetation control along the right-of-way. My first time seeing one of these in person, I'll definitely keep an eye out for them if one makes their way into Florida. It'd be interesting to see how CSX would use it compared to the BNSF. The Herzog move would be the last thing we'd see this day, as we'd have tickets to ride the next eastbound metro into town for some more sightseeing and some deep dish pizza. We'd be staying in a hotel in downtown Chicago, where there's almost zero rail action, with the exception of CTA's multiple branches that serve the plethora of communities around here. I'd stop one evening at their lake station for a few shots of the already 30-year-old subways completing their duties for this day, on what locals call the L, an abbreviated prefix for the elevated trackage here. A couple days later, I'd find myself along Metro's UP West route in Glen Ellyn, where a small and quaint downtown would greet us. Nestled 24 miles west of downtown Chicago, the community of Glen Ellyn hosts a population of 28,000 residents, one of the larger towns in DuPage County, and one of the oldest, settled in 1834. This 4th of July morning, there'd be an organized 5K in downtown, which would mandate a slow order for trains in the area, although it would be lifted shortly after the first train's passing. About 20 minutes after getting there, UP would show up with an eastbound intermodal led by one of their SD70 Aces. These wide cab beasts are some of my favorite models from EMD, with their nose-mounted headlights and large radiators installed on the tail end. Just a few minutes later, I'd relocate to the other side of the station as a Metro commuter train would be arriving, eastbound number 501 to Chicago. "15 minutes pass, and with the slow order lifted at 9 a.m. now, another Union Pacific freight shows up, this one led by a GE ES44 and another SD70 Ace. This intermodal is bound for Union Pacific's massive Chicago headquarters and yard at Elmhurst, a familiar suburb for many West Coast rail fans, as many trains that start and end up at Elmhurst can traverse the entire country at times, anywhere from California to Nebraska. Meeting this guy just a mile or so down the line would be a westbound, possibly the counterpart of this train, empty container traffic now heading out of Chicago for points west. UP would assign 3 GEs for this train, all painted in their classic yellow scheme, but not two alike. Splitting the train in two would be a pair of diesels, another SD70 Ace, and a rebuilt AC6000, painted freshly in what is my favorite UP scheme, large emblem on the nose and a waving American flag on the side. Metro 506 would be next, rolling past some wildflowers by the tracks. To be completely honest, I'm not sure if these are flowers or weeds, but either way they look really nice, waving in the breeze that the passing train would create. Back at the station now, Metro Train 503 would round the corner heading west towards Elburn. I decided to do a zoomed-in shot for this guy, which would prove to be a mistake, as soon as the train approached, Union Pacific would show up, which would force a less than satisfactory shot. Whatever, we still got the shot, and a cool consist nonetheless. The signs at the station, similar to those along Sunrail in Orlando, are to prevent disasters from occurring when more than one train are coming through town at once. I really think all the extra signage and electricity used for said signs could be removed by just bringing back the use of horns. It gets people's attention, and it's already on every locomotive. All these Chicago suburbs are quiet zones, so I guess you pick your battles. This would be the end of our time out this day. We'd head back into the city for some July 4th festivities before heading home the next day. Thanks for watching this one, y'all. I hope you guys enjoyed the new area as much as I did. Please share this video and the channel with your friends. The support is always much appreciated. But until we meet again, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.